Doris Lupke, and I'm the organizer of this event. Kevin Mullen is a Vermont State Senator from Rutland County.
The person I'd like to introduce is Representative Bob Helm from Fairhaven and Castleton. And Bob is the former chair of the Fish and Wildlife Committee, so many people in the sportsman's community really know him. He now serves on the Appropriations Committee and is watching our tax dollars very wisely. And we have asked Bob to start us off tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. The first person has to have had the longest commute, and that's my colleague in the Senate, Senator Joe. Sits on the Judiciary Committee, and you can be sure that if there is any proposed gun legislation, that Joe will be taking a close look at it. So he's a good guy to know and a good guy to have here tonight. The other person who walked in a few minutes ago that I want to introduce that's not up front, really probably should be up front, and that's our state's attorney, and that's Mark Breer. And Mark, we're really happy you came over. And I'd also like to introduce the first constable from Pawlet, David Ricard. And so we have the first and the second constable here, so everybody please do not speed when you leave tonight. David, just wave to everybody.
Or talking to the side.
So we saw a number of initiatives that were proposed last year. We saw a lot of proposed charter changes coming from the city of Burlington. And we know that there's a group in Vermont that is doling out a lot of money to try to get support for universal background checks and whatever else that they may be proposing. So tonight's a great night to have that discussion and to really find out where we are. Sitting next to Bob, we have Lars Jacob. And Lars is a seventh generation Vermonter, born in Townsend, Vermont. And he started hunting and fishing at a very early age and quickly decided that that's what he wanted to do for a career. He's an avid sportsman, but his real specialty is in the art of wing shooting. And he's been written up in a number of high-end wing shooting publications. Sitting next to Lars is Evan Hughes. And Evan is really the voice of the sportsman in the State House. And we see him patrolling the halls on a daily basis up there, trying to protect the sportsmen in Vermont from anything bad from occurring. And I think he's done a phenomenal job compared to all the proposals that we saw coming down the pike 2 years ago. Evan and his team really rallied the troops to make sure that we didn't see too much bad happen. On my left, I think everybody knows this gentleman, the Chief of Police from Fairhaven, but also your second constable. Bill has put in place a community policing effort in Fairhaven that really is a model for the state of Vermont to look at, and is well respected in his profession. And he wears many different police hats and should be able to answer any law enforcement questions. Sitting next to Bill is my seatmate in the Senate, and we've served together for a long time. We came into the House together back in the election of '98 and served in the House and have since reunited in the Senate. And she is the chair of the Institutions Committee and is on the Corrections Oversight Committee. A very powerful person when it comes to the corrections policy in the state of Vermont, Senator Peg Flory. And last but not least is Brian Kukan on the far end. And Brian is the president of the Manchester Rod and Gun Club and is an NRA Chief Range Safety Officer. He's a certified Chief Firearms Instructor, and he's certified in all 30 disciplines offered by the NRA training program. So, as you can see, the panel is diverse and should be able to answer anything. But the first question I will throw out before we open it up to the audience is just to ask each member up front to talk about what they see coming down the pike for Vermont. And I guess I'll start it off. I won't go at one end of the table or the other, but I'm going to start with Evan Hughes because he's in the trenches on a daily basis, and he didn't know that he was drawing the first straw. But Evan?
In the first week in May, the Gun Control Organization held a press conference in Montpelier indicating their agenda for the upcoming year. And it's something that's pretty universal across the country, is we're seeing what they call universal background checks as their primary agenda item. Now, they haven't defined what that is. They haven't told us what they mean by that. And Laura Krantz from VermontDigger.org interviewed me about a week ago and asked if the Federation, which is your NRA state association in Vermont, favored or opposed universal background checks. And as I had told Terry Hollenbeck of the the Burlington Free Press, can't render an opinion about a piece of legislation we can't read. They haven't given us anything to look at. Now, they declared this as their primary issue the first week of May, and here we are in early October, and they haven't given us a bill to read yet. And they're not building the Panama Canal. They're crafting a piece of legislation, which gun control people always say what they're doing is modest and reasonable and common sense. Well, we have an example of a bill in the state of Washington, and it's on the ballot out there. It's called I-594, and it's, as they call it out there, a universal background check, and it's about 16 or 18 pages long. And what they consider transfer of a firearm is loaning a firearm to somebody. So if you loan a firearm to someone, you've got to do a NICS check to give it to them, and a NICS check to get it back. Well, if you're going to do universal background checks, and they're not really universal, because criminals don't comply with it. So it's a mandatory background check for honest citizens. The question is, what's the process? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to do it? Those are the type of things that haven't been offered up yet. And what the gun control advocates are saying is this universal process. So just understand, it's not universal, it's mandatory. And it's a structure which we can't see yet. It's hard to comment on, but we know what that agenda is. We also know they've got some real strong lobbying clout. They've gone out and hired some pretty impressive lobbyists up in the State House. So this is pretty much unprecedented. We're going to have a real, the term we used to use, Donnybrook, up there over gun control.
As far as I'm concerned, more of a historian. I've been in this business for as long as time as I have, teaching people to shoot, learning to shoot, and seeing what has happened in other states. It's what happens. What history is doing is repeating itself once again. And what you find is that it becomes in all the countries and all the states that more and more legislation is involved in the gun control. That it becomes more difficult to do, and our kids, it becomes expensive. It becomes very difficult to bring up the people. The kids start realizing the guns are demonized. The kids the families can't afford it, and this is what happens. And yet, it's not the problem. I mean, as a historian, I'll tell you that the gun's ability to shoot as quick as it does, and the gun's ability to hold the ammunition that it does, is almost 100 years old. And yet, our problems are only more recent. So it's not the inanimate object that's the problem. We got to look at social. They got to take it and change the direction. Otherwise, they're just taking away our rights, and they're taking away what our kids have learned in the state of Vermont for so long. I grew up here as a Vermonter, learning how to shoot at a very young age, and it was education that helped. And you go into these states that have added new laws, and there's no education. They don't know. All they know is that the gun has been demonized. And we can't let that happen here. We just can't let that happen here.
I would say I don't work in a larger city. I work in a small rural area in Vermont. I guess the state attorney may agree with me. I don't see gun crimes getting larger in the area. We're seeing a small pocket of people coming up from other areas and obtaining guns. And the trainings I've been to, it seems like people will come up here, they'll buy a handgun, and they'll ship it off to Holyoke or down to New York City. Because they can buy a gun here, get you to go buy a gun for $400, give you 8, and they turn around and sell it for 16 in New York City. Some of the ATF has done some gun tracing where the guns are showing up in New York City 30 days of crime that occurred. The guns bought here and they show up in larger metropolitan areas. So as far as the gun control, I don't really have a standpoint on the background or on what I see coming. Currently the system we have seems to work. Vermont is one of the safest states, but we do have a small pocket of people coming to the area that are exploiting that avenue.
Okay, Peg. You want the mic, Peg?
I
don't know, usually people tell me to be quiet. Okay. I too was born and brought up in Vermont. I was a daddy's girl. I started bow hunting. Eventually got to the point of that he trusted me with a gun. I was just telling this gentleman here, I have 5 teenage grandkids. 4 of them are boys, 1 of them is a girl. They all hunt, but only my granddaughter has ever got a deer. Yeah, twice. What I see coming up are a couple of different issues. We have the Burlington Charter. That was passed in the city of Burlington last year and brought and introduced, as all charter changes are, into the legislature. Part of the charter change, it banned semi-automatic assault weapons and large capacity magazines. Flat banned them. Thankfully, the Committee of Jurisdiction took a look and said, this is an election year. They didn't actually say that, but they looked and realized that it was a whole lot more complicated than it appeared on the face of it. Not only because of the federal Constitution, but the Vermont Constitution, which is much, much clearer. We also have a state law, 24 VSA 2295, that says no municipality may regulate firearms. Unfortunately, to a lot of folks that gives you some comfort, but the legislature has an absolutely horrible habit of putting this one little word, notwithstanding 24 VSA, Burlington can do this. Will it come up again this year? Oh, I expect so. I also expect, as Kevin was saying, and a couple others were saying, there will be the registry or background check. Judging from the postcards I get every day coming from Gun Sense, which sounds like, the first time I saw it, Gun Sense, I thought, okay, is this an arm of NRA? And then I read and I thought, ooh. What they're going to be preying on us, because the first few postcards I got, I called the people and said, what are you looking for? Well, they didn't know. They had just received the postcards and sent them. A few of them, they said, people that are mentally ill shouldn't be allowed to carry a gun. I said, okay, define mentally ill, and how are we ever going to know that? Because the state of Vermont does not allow mental health records to go on to any list that the feds or state has. And define mental illness. Sometimes it's a very temporary thing. So I expect this will be out, it will be up, it will be hotly debated, and you're going to have to really follow it closely. Because I will tell you, when you get 10 or 15 calls, don't send a form letter, don't email every legislator, because when it's a hot button issue, I'll get 150 emails, all the same thing. And quite frankly, you look and say, yep, okay, I'll put this in the yes pile, this in the no pile. When you get a phone call from your constituents or a letter from your constituents, it makes legislators stop and think. And so I'd encourage every one of you to follow it closely, whether you support it or oppose it, and contact your legislator personally.
things about speaking last is everybody before you gets a chance to go ahead and speak about the subjects you were about to talk to. So for you guys, you're lucky it remains a little bit short. I am the son of a New Jersey decorated state trooper who wound up being the personal bodyguard for the Attorney General Sills, who was stricken by polio for 7 years. Grew up in an environment where, as the eldest son, I became him if anything happened. He wound up teaching here in Vermont at a number of colleges, of which I bump into often a number of his students who are in law enforcement and or involved in firearms training. So I feel like I come from a pretty good pedigree that way. I teach throughout the country, and one of the specialties that I teach is concealed carry and law, use of force law, and compliance for various states. No matter what 30 courses I'm teaching for NRA, if it's basic pistol, if it is rifle, if it is shotgun, I find that the majority of the conversation gets steered, or they try to steer it, the students do, towards compliance and issues that are untenable based on compliance by state, by county, sometimes by city. Use of force laws, concealed carry laws are complex, and traveling state to state nowadays is almost impossible to do unless you have a law degree. You have to know everything about each state and jurisdiction law in order to remain compliant. In other words, you're put in a situation as an average citizen that you may unknowingly enter into a jurisdiction where now from being legal to not being legal. How many here live in the Pawlet area? Raise your hands, okay? How many of you have ever gone to, say, Price Chopper in Granville on a last-minute grocery, okay? How many of you have all of a sudden realized, well, don't admit it, but have all of a sudden realized that the firearm that you legally had 1 mile away is now illegal, which would mandatorily get you at least 5 years in prison because of that mistake. So my encouragement to us as Vermonters and our leadership is to start working on laws in order to have us compliant with other states, so that our right as a Vermonter, which is a great right, actually can be had with no problem in other states. Secondly, in use of force, I would love to see our leadership start addressing castle doctrine and stand your ground, which instead, right now, the way that our laws are, is almost an implied duty of retreat in defensive posture, okay? Because there is no law crafted to state what you can do, it gets implied that it is a duty of retreat. Many of the states like Utah, if you ever want to see how they love their law-abiding citizens, just take a look at the legislation that they wind up doing on behalf of their citizens, so that their citizens can enjoy not only Utah law, but enjoy that same law in many other states across the United States.
Thank you, Brian. And, Brian has a pretty basic philosophy. He doesn't try to change anybody's mind about whether or not they should possess a firearm or not, but he tries to give them the tools and the education to make their own informed decision, and that's what we should all be trying to do for ourselves, is making informed decisions. Before I throw it out to the audience, I do want to ask one more grounding question. Basically, any legislator that takes office takes an oath of office. And in that oath of office, they promise that they're going to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the state of Vermont. And I thought I might just throw a question to Senator Flory as an attorney to basically give us a grounding in the Second Amendment and the 16th article of the Vermont Constitution.
Sure. I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but unlike some of the legislators, I actually have read the Constitution more than once and take it pretty seriously. Our Vermont Constitution is much more protective And it says, the people have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves and the states. And standing armies in time of peace are dangerous to liberty. They ought not to be kept up. And the militia should be kept under strict subordination to and governed by civil power. But the main section in that, the people have a right to bear arms for the defense of themselves. In 1903, our Supreme Court went even a little further than that in explaining it. In State v. Rosenthal, the Vermont court established the right to carry firearms without a permit. That remains the law. The law can be changed, but that is the law. The Constitution, to change the Vermont Constitution, is not an easy process. And it's up to us as legislators to remind people when they come to us with these proposals of the constitutional issue, particularly the Vermont constitutional issue. Vermont is one of the few states that have virtually no restrictions. The only restriction in Vermont is that we may not use silencers, use or possess or sell silencers for civilians. Law enforcement, military can, civilians can. That's the only law on the book for the state of Vermont. And we have the absolute lowest injury by firearms of any state in the union.
Thank you, Beck. So at this point, I'm going to open it up to the audience, and I would ask that you come forward and say it very, very loudly, because this is being filmed tonight, and it'll be rebroadcast. So if we can make sure that the film takes that up, and whoever answers the question, I will ask them to repeat the question just to make sure that it gets picked up. So who would like to start? Mr. Cutler, and I should introduce Mr. Cutler. He's the president of the Gun Owners of Vermont.
Okay, Mr. Kuchen, you speak about standard ground laws. Peg just said constitutionally, we have a right to bear arms for the defense of ourselves. We also have a public law that says that we have a right to protect ourselves and property. This is under state statute. I think, and no, I don't mean any offense, you should rethink this and look up those statutes. We already have the standard ground law. It's been in this state since the writing of our Constitution.
Yeah, you bring up a good point. The standard ground law, it actually becomes very specific. It basically says that you have a lawful right to be, if you can lawfully be at that spot, you have a lawful right not to have to leave that spot. So it goes beyond what you were just talking about. The Vermont laws essentially do give you that right to bear arms in self-defense. But from there it stops. So for instance, what it does is in your homes, castle doctrine, home, whether you're in a hotel, whether you're in a car, it does not further your right to reasonable. What happens is, okay, use of deadly force, it is in fear of imminent severe bodily injury or death, okay? The word reasonable starts entering when you have castle doctrine. Notice the difference. So it's one word difference. So what happens is, if somebody is breaking into your house, with the castle doctrine, you can then, under reasonable fear of imminent bodily injury and death, you can then engage. Without that reasonable part, it's implied by no law crafting. It's implied that you should probably think first of retreat. Stand your ground is, again, entirely different. It gives, again, our Constitution gives us the right to bear arms for self-defense, but it doesn't necessarily say that you can or should stay where you are legally. So all it does is reinforce your defensive laws. That's why many states adopt it.
Does any other panelists want to add anything to that? Okay. Next question? Yes, sir.
Eric Mack, Peg, is it legal in Vermont to carry a concealed weapon, say a handgun concealed on your person, say in the city of Burlington or any other city?
It is not illegal anywhere in the United States, and the 1903 case went on to say, let's see, I'll read it exactly, the one final section. May carry an open or concealed without a permit if you are a U.S. citizen or a lawfully admitted alien and not otherwise prohibited from possessing firearms under state or federal law. And we have no state law that prohibits you from carrying it. There are some federal laws that prohibit some people from carrying firearms. So if that person, if you had a convicted felon that is prohibited from carrying a firearm, it's illegal for them to carry it whether it's concealed or not, because it's federal law.
So Evan, would you like to add to that?
There are some statutes that limit where you can carry a firearm.
Yes.
There are some statutes that have jurisdiction over where and how you can carry a firearm. I think it's 13 VSA section 4004. It says you may not carry any type of weapon with the intent or have a vow to inflict great bodily harm on another person. This law is so old that it was a law in Vermont before our laws were codified into their present statutory form. So you can't carry a weapon, and the state's attorney can correct me.
It's just, I can only say that,
Stand up,
Yes.
Mark, and address
the question is there a law prohibiting possession? And there isn't. Essentially, my office will prosecute any crime that's investigated and brought to our office, but we don't prosecute possession of firearms. If the firearm is used in a way that can cause a simple assault or an aggravated assault or in any way that is an assault or reckless endangerment, we would bring the charge. But the statute that you're referring to, I don't have my Title 13 with me, but I've been prosecuting for 30 years in Rutland County, and we have not brought any charge against any person in Rutland County. And it's my understanding that Peg Florida's research is very accurate. There's a constitutional provision and there's case law that allows Vermonters to carry weapons. The only law that comes into play with firearms that my office deals with, which is the state's attorney's office, would be if you do have a fish and game violation. If one is caught driving in a vehicle with a loaded firearm, that, okay, rifle or shotgun, I think I'm being corrected by some people that read it much more. We don't have to apply that law very often, but that can result in a fish and game violation. But a criminal violation where one would get jail or a criminal conviction, well, I haven't brought it.
The statute exists.
Now, I guess there's some statutes.
And the one Ed referred to is Title 10, 4705, subsection B, and it's a Fish and Wildlife Law.
Oh, yeah.
So, and that was the reason so that people who were committing fish and wildlife violations couldn't carry a loaded long gun in a motorized vehicle on the road accessible to the public. So that's why it's a Title 10 law.
Yeah, and that's in effect, and we do prosecute that. But we haven't prosecuted anyone for carrying a weapon with some type of intent. If you're committing a felony and you have a dangerous weapon, which would be a firearm, they could be prosecuted. But you've got to be committing a felony.
We also have laws about bringing a firearm into a courthouse or knowingly bringing it into a school building or a school bus.
That's correct.
And bringing it onto school property, just like the other statute I said, with the intent to harm someone else. So there are laws, and there's a law also about bringing it onto institutional property. And the definition of institution is correctional institutions. So that you can't bring a firearm onto prison grounds. So there are some laws in Vermont. The few laws that we have serve us well. We have one of the lowest crime rates in the country. We have one of the safest on firearms records on safety, and it's our laws serve us well. We don't need any more laws regulating firearms or the people that own them.
Yes, Senator Flory?
I think it's important to realize that those laws that have some restrictions all require intent to do some crime or something against another person. The not being able to bring it into a courthouse or any of those places, those were adopted, they're not statutes. Those were adopted. You're not breaking a law if you walk to the courthouse door because you forgot to take your gun out. Now, they're going to take it from you. You can't walk into the courthouse. That's common sense. That was for protection. The school grounds, though, back when I was in the House, I chaired Judiciary Committee, and that's when that came. And you can bring a gun onto some school grounds. In my town, our shooting range is on property owned by our school. It isn't the school building, but the property is owned by the school district. And that's where, frankly, we do training for gun safety for kids. So the law requires some evil intent to not be able to carry a gun, and some buildings you can't bring them in.
Sure. When Columbine was happening, I mean, as the shooting was going on, I was sitting up in the Senate gallery watching a vote on a bill we had on protecting gun shop owners and manufacturers from lawsuits. We ended up having to hold that bill up to stop it being Christmas tree. And out of that, in 2000, there was a change in the statutes on guns on school property. And what it says is you cannot knowingly bring a firearm or onto a school bus or inside a school building. And as far as school property, that's just the same as the other statute. You have to have an intent to harm somebody else. And the reason this is so important is in Vermont, schools own incredible amounts of property. You could have a student, as it says weapons too, who's crossing school property to go fishing. He's got a fishing a knife on. And if you didn't have that intent element in there, they could be arrested for having that knife on the school property. So that's why it was so important to us to not have school property have any more restrictions than there is around the rest of the state. It's just, you cannot carry a deadly weapon with the intent or having the vow to hurt somebody else. And that law, like I said, is so old that it predates our laws in the present form. And look at what we have in the state. Look at how safe we are compared to, we're only a mile or two from New York State. Compare their crime rates to ours and our gun laws to them. We're bordered by Massachusetts, the same thing. They've got gun laws down there that are draconian. Trying to get a carry permit in most states. First off, New York State doesn't issue non-resident carry permits, and they don't respect the carry permits of any other state. And you're hearing a lot of this push for what they call universal background checks. And what they are is they're mandatory restrictions on the citizens, because the criminals don't comply with them anyways.
Exactly.
And they're basing this on Vermont is flooding Massachusetts with guns. You hear it all the time. BATFE, right? Well, and the BATFE tracebacks from Massachusetts to Vermont in the 3-year period of 2011, 12, and 13, there was a traceback of 3,043 firearms that showed up in Massachusetts from anywhere. 1,235 of them, the most from any singular state, came from Massachusetts. They are the single largest contributor of the guns that they're tracing back. 3-year period, 41 came from Vermont. 1,235 came from Massachusetts, 41 came from Vermont. Vermont is not a gun source state for other states. Who says so? WCAX in a story they did on June 10th. Who says so? The Boston Globe on a story they did April 24th, where they bemoaned the fact that with all their restrictive gun laws, 46% of the handguns they're tracing back in Massachusetts are from Massachusetts. They're the greatest source of their own guns they're tracing back. We're not a problem for other states. Our crime rate is, if not the lowest, it's always in the 5 lowest states in the country. Our gun safety record is stellar. We're a model for these other states, not a problem. And when people say we're flooding these other states with guns, they're defaming our state.
That's right.
And bear this in mind. We're a state that exports products to other states. And that Vermont name is like a trademark, and it's got value. And also, we're a state highly dependent upon tourism. And these folks that defame our state hurt our reputation and are attacking our character when all the numbers from ATF show we're not a problem for these other states. We don't need any more gun laws. We're just fine. We're doing okay. Work on something else up under the gold dome.
Right.
So I saw a hand back here in the middle. Yes?
Hi, I'm Jim Mack, and I'm a hunter instructor, 4-H shooting sports instructor, NRA instructor, range officer, National Muzzleloader Rifle Association instructor, and this is to our people in the Senate, our representatives. In hunter education, we say we should educate and we don't have to legislate. And I think that should be key for everyone to listen to. And we've done very well with not having accidents. And the big thing that we like to say is we use the word firearms, not weapon. That's kind of the word that we shouldn't be throwing out there a whole lot. It's used against us a lot. It means weapon is used for deadly force. Firearm is something that we all enjoy using, and that's my take on it. And I don't think we need to have more legislation. I think we may need more education.
It's a real important point, Gibby. And, growing up in Vermont, I see Justin Lindholm sitting in the front. I can remember getting my first hunting license at Lindholm Sports, but it was after passing the NRA safety course, and it was after going to the camp at Kehoe and having training there, and going for 2 seasons with my dad, my uncles, and other family members to learn about the woods, learn how to be a proper custodian while hunting. So, Gibby, you make a real valid point that education really is the key, and I think that everybody in the room would agree with you.
I'm older than Kevin. We didn't have hunter safety when I was a kid.
The states that
Oh, well.
The states that have added more laws are the same states that have always had the most severe laws to begin with. So that's already proof in itself that it doesn't work.
So, over here?
Yes, Heck, Lori,
Yes.
you brought up the thing as far as, a convicted felon
Yes,
not having a firearm.
yes,
As far as I know, in the state of Vermont, it reads center fire or rim fire, and convicted felons can use a muzzle
can use,
right.
yes,
I just want to
Yes.
reiterate, because there's 2 or 3 that I know.
absolutely.
There actually is one, it covers under the federal law, but I think it's important to bring it out, is that if you have a violation of abuse prevention order or a conviction, or a
Correct,
violation of domestic assault, the federal government can prohibit and does prohibit the possession of firearms.
right,
Not firearms,
muzzle,
certain rifles, but
Yeah.
excluding muzzle loaders.
Right.
right,
Although I can't speak for certain all federal laws, that's my understanding, muzzle loaders are allowed.
The muzzle loaders that can be converted, the multi-barrel changed muzzle loaders fall under ATF laws and are not,
It can be.
cannot be owned by.
That is 2 other limitations.
But firearms manufactured before 1898 are considered antiques or curios, and they aren't restricted either. So the federal laws, I mean, people say there's no gun laws in Vermont. That's not absolutely accurate. But if you look at the United States Code, in Title 18, Chapter 44, Sections 921, 922, the federal laws are expansive, and they apply uniformly all around the country. So we're doing very well in our state with the gun laws we have. They work for our state. All we have to do is just, and we're doing it, hunter ed courses, firearms safety courses, ranges that are being developed. We're creating a safe state in our Vermont. And that's what we need to do. We're doing it on our own. We're doing quite well without people coming in from outside telling us we got to change because they think there needs change to be made.
So, Evan, let me throw a question your way that I had, and that is in the last session, maybe it was a little bit of paranoia on my part, but we had a little bit of a tweaking to the fish and game laws, and as the language came before the Senate, it was giving the board the ability to change what I think is a cultural heritage here in Vermont, and that is the 2-week season in November for deer hunting. And so, as I read it, I felt it could be bifurcated, and we did do an amendment on the Senate floor to try to fix that. Was I just being paranoid to make sure that that fix was there, or?
If you were being paranoid, that's a good kind of paranoid. The bill the Senate is referring to is H 589, and it was an expansive bill, very comprehensive on fish and wildlife issues, and we've got a board member here, and he can probably speak to that too. One thing we want to look for in this state is like management of our deer herd, management of our wildlife species, be done by the board, be done by the Fish and Wildlife Department. They've got a bear referendum going on up in Maine right now, where the future of bear hunting is based upon the public vote. Just like in the state of Washington with that bill I talked about, I-591, whether checks on transfers of firearms have to be across the board and mandatory. That passes up in the state of Maine. It changes the control of the bear hunting season out of what they call inland fisheries and wildlife. The Humane Society of the United States has come in. They put about $3 million into this campaign to stop the bear hunting being the way it is in the state of Maine. There's a huge battle out there. And in the future of managing their game species falls in a political spectrum. We want it in this state, so the Fish and Wildlife Department does it on science with the input of a Fish and Wildlife Board of a citizen from every county. You can speak to that.
Yes.
Justin?
Senator Mullen was talking about we have the power now that the legislature gave us to move the
16-day season of regular rifle season. Now, the reason we wanted that power is we may actually move it back a week to make it like it was last year. Last year it was moved back a week. And the reason for that is that we're finding that the first few days there's no snow on the ground. And it's basically based on weather stuff, why we want to play with that. Now, we have had some people talk that they want to cut the rifle season down, and I have been very vociferous about saying no to that. I don't want to cut the rifle season down. That's a tradition in Vermont, and I don't think you'd ever see that happen. But we might move it more 1 week once in a while to help out with the weather.
See a question?
One point I'd like to make is, I started out working in the federal government in Vermont, being a full-time military technician, the Vermont Army National Guard. And November was the only month of the year that all the Guard units in the state drilled on the same weekend. And it was the first weekend in November. And the reason was, nobody wanted to explain to Washington why we had a 75% AWOL rate during the month of November, because everybody had gone deer hunting. So I just thought I'd bring up that point about the deer season.
So I don't know if she was here when I was making some introductions earlier of some people that I saw in the room, but I see her hand raised, and it's my former seatmate in the Senate, former Senator Wendy Wilton, who is now the Rutland City Treasurer. Wendy, you had a question?
Yeah, well, maybe a comment and a question, and that is, I'm concerned about, what I hear about the move to look at universal background checks. And to me, and I think there's a group called Gun Sense that's sort of pushing that, right? And what concerns me about this is, I don't think their thought process is very well thought out. And what concerns me about it as a gun owner is the only people who will be legitimate and be legal will be those of us who are law-abiding citizens. And believe me, I live in Rutland City. There's probably plenty of guns around that would never be registered, and there would be no background check, and those are the bad people. So they would slide under the radar screen, and those of us who own would register, or many of us would, I guess. But the problem also is beyond that, and it gets to be where we are in this information age. That anybody who's registered, and there was an issue in Connecticut or Long Island, New York, where a newspaper went to the state and got the names and addresses of gun owners and they published them. That makes me a target for the bad people to come to my house and rob me or take my gun. So I have a problem with that from two perspectives. One, the bad people aren't going to comply, and those of us that are legal might, and we're the only ones that will. And secondly, it's an invasion of my privacy, because then it becomes public information. So I think this is really not just a Second Amendment issue, this is possibly a First Amendment issue. And I want everybody in the room to think about that, and think about who you're voting for the legislature and statewide offices this year, and every one of you who's going to vote, go find 5 other people to vote with you. This is really important, and it gets to the basis of who we are in Vermont and our state constitution. And if you have any responses, I'd love to hear them.
In case you weren't here when Dolores gave the marching orders, there's no politicking allowed tonight.
Oh, sorry. But I didn't say anything about it's hard, but
So, would anybody like to make any comments about what Wendy said? That was a very alarming thing when that was published by the newspaper. Any comments from the panel?
And it really isn't about the guns, but I have found out in the last couple of weeks, unfortunately, how easy it is for people to breach security when my personal and law office email got hacked. And if any of you are on my contact list, I'm glad you didn't send money to Ukraine to get me out of a ditch. But the real frightening part of it is all of my personal and office email has been diverted someplace else. I have taken it to computer experts because I tend to be technologically challenged. I've taken it to them. I've contacted my internet provider. They said it's a very sophisticated hacking, but somebody else is getting my email. So please don't ever email me, call me.
Okay. So I see a patient arm back there. Yes, sir.
People often come to here, how many of them realize that when you buy a firearm, you go through a background check?
You do.
Right? How many criminals have you heard of? Go to a background check. Where do they get their firearms? They're stealing from the man that's legally owns it. Or they do what's called a straw man transaction. They get a friend or girlfriend, or they just pay somebody to do it. Yeah, to show up. I mean, if I went and bought a firearm at a gun show, I do the background check, the paperwork is there. I'm buying it for you. You won't blow somebody away. Well, how long is it going to take before that comes back to me? Well, I thought the question, I'll repeat the question I heard. How are they getting their guns, the bad guys? They're not going through a background check. They're not dealing with an FFL. Or if they are, what they're doing is they're sending somebody in to go through the checkpoint. A clean person, somebody with no record. This goes on in all these states that have all these restrictive laws all the time. And if this were passed in Vermont, they would do the same thing in that case. Now, if they pass this, there's also, how does it work? Who's going to do the background checks? The FFLs? Well, if they do, you sell your firearm to this gentleman, and you walk into the FFL, they're not going to do it for free. They're going to want a fee for that. Now, something you don't pay for now, you're now going to pay for if FFLs are willing to do the checks. But the FFLs may find themselves in a situation where their insurance carrier says, when we wrote the policy for you, it was for you selling your own stock, not these other transactions. If you're going to do these other types of transactions, A, we're going to drop your policy. B, we're going to increase the rate of your policy by 300%. So all these specifics about how this is going to get carried out haven't been discussed. It's just, we got an idea here. Let's throw up these mandatory background checks, which don't impact the criminals anyways. And who's going through the hoops? The honest citizen. And that just doesn't make any sense. And what we're going through here is a solution in search of a problem. We don't have problems in this state. In the top three-tier states, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine, which are continually in the lowest 5 crime rate states in the country, have the least restrictive laws governing guns in New England. The 3 states that have the most restrictive laws, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Connecticut, have much higher crime rates. So once again, it's a solution in search of a problem.
Peg, you wanted to add?
Making the law doesn't fix anything. Guess what? We made heroin and cocaine illegal. How's that working for us? Yeah, folks.
Okay, Lars?
Well, what she's saying goes back to what I said at the beginning. It's a social issue, not the object issue. But as an FFL holder, going back to what education does, is we do have some laws. We have the federal laws that we abide by. We do NICS background checks. And many times I have gentlemen who are doing a private sale, which is perfectly legal, person to person. But they come into me anyways, and they go through the proper procedure of a instant background check to do that sale. So it's education that makes everything better. They're the ones doing this because they know it's the right thing to do. We have these existing laws. We use them. We definitely don't need to add to them because the reason why it works for us is because we stay educated in the issue, that we understand what it does to maintain safe. But we got enough laws, and we have it working already for us in the state of Vermont.
Okay, Bob?
Yeah, this is a nice community. I come from a nice community. All of this area is fairly nice. However, if this meeting were taking place in Chittenden County or part of Washington County, there'd be twice as many people here and it'd be the totally opposite attitude. And that's where these pushes come from. And they've got a population, as you well know, that's much greater than ours, so it's hard to win against them sometimes. So if and when this stuff comes up, I plead with you. You might think, oh, geez, I'm busy, and on my voice, just one, it doesn't count if I don't call or write or something. I plead with you, do it. Get your wife to do it, get your brother to do it, your father to do it, or whoever you can get to do it, because numbers really do count. They really do count. And we've got to work harder because we've got fewer people. But you take Chittenden County, part of Washington County, Bennington County,
Brattleboro.
whoa, Brattleboro, they'll do it in a heartbeat. They don't care. And that's their mindset there. It's a big city mindset. So please, stay hot about it.
So Bob is telling everybody to be very, very diligent in following this issue, and he's bringing up some valid points. I'm looking over the shoulder of Evan to my right, and he has an article in front of him. Evan, you might want to talk about that article and what the legislators who are in the State House will be facing as far as lobbying pressure.
This is from 7 Days Magazine. It's from their political column, Fair Game. And it's the lobbyists in Montpelier rated each other. And they rated the number one lobbyist is Adam Crasson. Adam Crasson, the Crasson's group. And he's the one representing the gun control organization. Down below, they rate number 5 is Todd Bailey from Kimball, Sherman, and Ellis. They're representing the city of Burlington. And when the city of Burlington put out their bid for lobbying, one of the items they specified was that the lobbyist applying to be their lobbyist had to be well versed in gun control legislation. So we're seeing a opposition of the type that's organized and funded we haven't seen before. Vermonters a lot of times take for granted that what is as it is now will always be. And that's not the case. And we have an obligation to protect the rights we have now. We inherited these rights from those who came before us and secured these rights for us. And shame on us if this disappears during our time at the tiller when we were in charge because we were too busy doing something else. That phone call, I'm too busy. I'll tell you, I'm up in the State House all the time. When these guys are getting phone calls, I see the pages coming in with stacks of these calls coming in, and nothing up there goes unnoticed. It's a hotbed of rumors. And when something's going on, everybody in the place, all 180 of them, and all the lobbyists too, are watching and seeing what's going on and what's happening. Your phone calls have more impact than you have any idea. You underestimate your influence with your legislators. Like Peg said, they get 5 or 10 phone calls. They don't get that very often on issues. That's very unusual to them. So you have more voice than you think you have. Use it. Talk to your legislators. Some of the fishing game clubs around the state are inviting legislators in and asking them, where are you going to be in the upcoming session? What have you done for us? Where are you going to be in the future? And they've got a right to ask them. The Mill Valley Fishing Game Club just did that about 2 weeks ago. My club, the Berry Fishing Game Club, did it last week. Ask these guys. You know, you've got the capability to have a major impact on what's on up there. And this is the prime time. You're within a month of the election cycle. Use your voice.
So Evan, as a follow-up to that, in the last session, it appeared through the lobbyist disclosure forms that the second highest amount paid to any lobbying firm was paid for those who are seeking gun control. And has anybody been able to track the source of that fund? Is that out-of-state funding? Or?
They haven't had to file that yet. They were third in contribution to lobbyists. They paid more in Green Mountain Power, IBM, Vermont Yankee, to their lobbyists to represent their issues in the State House. This guy right here. Than all the other lobbyists in the legislature. There's hundreds of them. There's hundreds of registered lobbyists. They're mounting a serious attack. We better mount a serious defense.
Okay, right here.
Yes, I'd just like to, I maybe misunderstood this. Earlier today, I thought I heard, or earlier this evening, I thought I heard that you had to write a letter, that the phone call wasn't as effective as a letter would be. Does it make any difference?
What she was trying to say is that
Form email.
a form email doesn't really cut it. And what happens too often, legislators receive, on any given day, you could get 100 emails on the same issue, and it says exactly the same thing, because organizations say, they shoot it out to all their members and say, please send this to your legislator. Well, once you've seen the first 2 or 3 letters saying the exact same thing on your email, you're not going to bother reading the rest. She wasn't talking about a personal letter or a phone call. Those really do make a difference. It's just when everybody has a form letter, that doesn't work.
But lots of times I'll be emailed with a telephone number to call there, and I'll speak to a representative on the floor, a secretary or whatever. Does that work?
Absolutely.
Yes, and what happens when you call the State House, there's a system at the State House where immediately the note is taken, and then it's delivered by pages, who are 8th graders from around the state, to the legislator that you're trying to get it to. And so that's what Evan was talking about, the pink slips. When somebody comes in with a pile of pink slips for a legislator, it does get noticed. So, yes?
Since we have a couple lawyers in the room, what is it about a charter change like Burlington is trying to do that allows them to essentially circumvent the law and the Constitution? What's magical about a charter change?
I'm not sure that they're going to be, I don't think they're going to be able to do it. Specifically because it says, because of the way the current statutes are written and our Constitution and case law. But they can vote on anything and bring it to the legislature. When you do a charter change, any city does a charter change, they have to put it to the legislature. It goes into government operations for review, and the legislature has to approve the charter change.
Does the governor have to sign off on it?
The governor has to sign off on it, yes, absolutely. Has to pass both chambers, the House and the Senate, and the governor has to sign off on it. But the first part of it is it has to be constitutional. That's the first part of it. They will try to, they have tried to argue that this is constitutional. I don't see how they're coming up with that argument, and that's why it fell on its face, part of the reason last year. But I have no doubt they'll bring it back up again.
The ballot issues in Burlington were 3 of them. One was mandatory storage. One was seizing a firearm in a domestic case with no judicial order. And firearms in property under the control of a business with a first-class liquor license. Now, what they were saying in Burlington is, it's only guns and bars. Well, it's not the case. I mean, the way that ordinance was written, that if you went into a restaurant with a first-class liquor license, and you had left your shotgun in your car and loaded, locked in the trunk, you'd have violated that ordinance. That would have meant you're facing seizure of your firearm, 90 days imprisonment, and a fine. Now, I'm from the Bay Area, and all these legislators...
But a Bolton High School graduate.
All of these legislators are familiar with the Bay Area. If Montpelier enacted this type of ordinance, and someone was shooting at the Montpelier Gun Club, about a mile away, there's a restaurant called the Wayside. Very popular restaurant, all the legislators know where it is. So if somebody's shooting their shotgun at the Montpelier Gun Club, they unload the shotgun, they load it in the trunk. Say 2 carloads of people are doing this, right? And they go over the Wayside. The restaurant's only a mile or so from the Montpelier Gun Club. And they park in the parking lot of the Wayside. The Wayside has a first-class liquor license. Depending on where they park in the parking lot, they may or may not have violated that ordinance, because the town line between Berlin and Montpelier runs through the parking lot of the Wayside. So one car could park in Montpelier and be facing arrest and seizure of their firearm and 90 days in jail and a fine, and the car in the next parking space over, the owner wouldn't. If you go in the city of Burlington, and they want to do this, and you're traveling south on Route 7, Shelburne, and you're down near the post office on the Champlain Bridge in Shelburne Road, the west side of the street, the right side, you're headed south, is in Burlington. The left side of the street, the east side of the street, is in South Burlington. The reason the legislature passed this law Peg was talking about in 1986, 1987, we call it the Vermont Sportsman's Bill of Rights. It's 24 VSA section 2295. And it says to the municipalities, you shall not regulate these things. And the reason is, you need a uniform set of laws in this state so that you can go from one place to another, and lawful citizens can try to comply with the law without unintentionally violating the law. And all they're trying to do is go from here to there, where they're going hunting, fishing, trapping, or on their way to the range to shoot. There's an exception in that law, and that's what Peg referred to, is except for 24 VSA section 2291 subsection 8, which says that municipalities can regulate discharge. Now, in 2006, we fought really hard to get a law through to amend that statute so that municipalities could not regulate existing sport shooting ranges as defined by Title 10, Section 5227. So that they just couldn't come in and say, no more shooting on Sunday. That's it, you're done. You can't do that. So what we've worked out in this state is a series of laws that work for us. What are we trying to change and why? We can't see any problem with crime. We're obviously, according to the ATF figures, we're not putting guns into other states, creating problems with them. And we're have one of the best firearm safety records in the country. It's a solution in search of a problem.
Okay, yes, back there.
I came prepared to actually read about 3 pages and almost buried that, but I just wanted to pick up on a few things that were said here tonight. And what I find really disturbing is that we as gun owners and hunters and sports people are constantly put on the defensive by other people that are charging after us for no good reason whatsoever. I agree with Wendy Wilton. I think this is going to be one of the more critical elections that we've had in terms of gun control ever. And if we don't get the vote out, if we don't get the people elected that are going to support us, we've got nobody to blame but ourselves. I agree with Evan that, you can't act on a piece of legislation that hasn't been drafted, in terms of this universal registration. We know what it is. We know what it is. It's just a hoax. You go with registration, then you go with confiscation. It's what's going to come right down the road. They're going to come after our guns. It's what it's all about. We've heard that, we don't need to change. We're the safest state in the union. I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So I've heard the phrase stand your ground. I think that's the thing that everybody elected to Montpelier. If you're on our side, damn it, stand our ground. We don't want any changes to our Constitution. I don't want you taking away my right to actually protect myself. And I'll be damned if I'm going to have anything registered. I will not do that. I will not let myself fall into that trap.
And
I really think that politicians that vote, in support of restricting gun rights, let's turn the table up. Let's get off the defensive and get on the offensive. Charge it with treason. What right have you got to come after me for rights that have been fought for occurred for, what, 250 years or something like that. They haven't gone anywhere. And, you know, there's going to be more and more of us, hopefully get fired up. I really mean, get people out there and, you know, get things going. I will read page 3. And I sort of picked this up off the internet. And I've given it somewhat of a title, what I call the silencing of an already too quiet America. First, they came for the Fifth Amendment. I did not speak out as I had not been arrested. Then they came for the Fourth Amendment. Again, I did not speak out as I had not been searched. Then they came for the Second Amendment. Once again, I did not speak out as I did not own any guns. Finally, they came for the First Amendment. And there was nothing left in the Constitution to protect. And my folks, my friends, that's exactly what's happening here in America today. And damn it, if you don't do something about it, you know, we'll have nobody to blame but ourselves. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? See the answer? Oh, yes, sir.
On this meeting here, how much of this, what you just heard, especially for the gentleman there, you're going to take back up to Montpelier and voice it to, you know, your colleagues?
Well, I can assure you that Senator Flory and I are diligent on these issues already. And so, same with Representative Helm. I mean, Representative Helm has been a stalwart in the House for 24 years. I think if you go to the NRA website, you'll see that you know, the three of us are endorsed candidates with A ratings. But it's up to the electorate to do that research. And again, we're trying not to do anything political here tonight, but we seem to keep sliding that way.
But check all the candidates, the incumbents' voting records. They're all available online. And don't be afraid to ask any one of us our position on this or any other issue. Because if we can't give you an honest answer, even though it may not be politically correct, if we can't give you an honest answer, you shouldn't vote for us because we don't belong up there.
So, Evan, let me throw this at you, because today, for those who saw the press, there was a senator from Windham County who had an A rating, but took money from Gun Sense and said that she supports legislation. What do you do in a case like that?
Then the NRA readjusts her rating. And I was talking with our NRA ILA state liaison as I was driving down here, and that's what they're going to do. She's not going to be able to keep that rating. When a rating is done, you try and do it on their past voting record and what questionnaires they've provided. So there's 180 races in the legislature. There's usually at least 2 candidates in each race, and the NRA is trying to do the best it can on the information it has when it's doing a rating early in the month, or actually in the middle of September, trying to get it in for a November magazine. There's a lead time on the magazine. So what that senator did will impact their NRA rating. Simple as that. But I want to say one other thing too. Not just about talking to the folks who are here, but it's just as important to talk to the candidates who aren't. And you need to come up and tell them, look, my position on this is we don't need any new gun laws, right? Leave us alone. There's other things for you guys to work on. In addition to that, when you're talking to them, a lot of times they'll say, well, don't you agree we need to do something about this? You're not there to take a quiz for them. You tell them what your position is. You don't have to justify it to those folks. And I'll tell you something, we need to get folks to vote. When someone's speaking to a legislator or a candidate, these guys, this isn't their first ride at the rodeo. They'll listen to that person and they can go to the town hall and check and see if that person's a registered voter, and if they vote or not. And if they don't vote, if they're not a registered voter, Well, that was easy to fix, you know, I don't have to listen to what they say. I want to tell you something else, and this has a personal application to me. If my son can vote from Kandahar Airfield in Afghanistan, and he's done it already, what excuse can we have for those of us that are right here and have the convenience of voting by early voter ballot or going down to that poll to not uphold the rights of those folks who are over there protecting us physically and keeping our rights secure? Shame on us if we don't.
So I would say that every 2 years in Vermont, we have an election. And it's our chance as citizens to quiz the candidates and find out where they stand. And it's really up to each of us to make sure we understand who we are voting for. Not just because they're nice people, they coach somebody or did something like that, but because they agree with our common core principles. And so we have to be diligent in that. And when we get to the part tonight where we ask the candidates in the room to stand up, I would just ask them to limit any comments they have to their stance on guns, because that's what this is about tonight. And you'll get a chance to get first-hand information. So is there any other questions from the floor before I open it up to, yes, sir.
Actually, it's more of an announcement than anything else. I've heard from a few of you that we need to attack and start fighting against the anti-gunners in this state. Starting tomorrow night, in the Rockingham Free Public Library in Bellows Falls, Gun Sense is going to be having a forum just like this. We're going to be there. We're not only going to be there, we're going to be there with the truth. We're going to have the statistics. We're going to have anything possibly done, and hopefully we'll have some numbers along with us. I'm going to personally challenge Ann Braden to a debate right then and there. We will have the information, and we will have anything we need right there. I'll bet you a nickel right now she won't take the challenge. Okay?
Representative Held?
Yeah, I'll give you a success story, what you can do. It was probably 1995, and there was a senator from Chittenden County, I'll leave her name out of it, and another senator from Washington County, and I'll leave his name out of it. But there was a gun bill in the Senate, and they wanted to have a public hearing on it. I was chairing the Fish and Wildlife, and one of the senators came to me and said, "Can you get the gun community notified?" I said, "Better believe I can." So all I did really is contact a half a dozen people, and it went out like a wave. A phone tree that I didn't know existed was enacted. And then there was a public hearing a couple weeks later. And just prior to the public hearing, about 3 or 4 days, one of the senators asked me if I could undo that phone tree. And I said, no, I couldn't, even if I wanted to. And there were estimated around 800 people that showed up for that. It was probably one of their worst nights in their candidates even there. Yeah, but my point is, you can do it. I hope NRA, I believe, had that phone tree, or somebody, but I hope that's still in but if something like that comes your way, you want to listen, because that kind of, we didn't hear anything about a gun bill after that until now. Yeah. You agree?
So I saw a hand down here in the aisle. Yes?
So I drove 3 hours to get here tonight, and I didn't take a wrong turn to Tinmouth to find my way here. I represent Caledonia County in the state Senate, and I want you guys to know that you are not alone. In fact, in the Northeast Kingdom, we have this view about Rutland County that it is actually the southernmost county in the Northeast Kingdom. For a very good reason. Everything going on here tonight, you can hear in St. Johnsbury or Newport or any other town in the kingdom. What's important is to take it a step further than what you've just heard tonight. You don't have to limit your phone calls and your lobbying to the people you actually send to the legislature. You can contact any state senator, any legislator, the governor, the lieutenant governor. Take advantage of that. We live in a very small state. If they hear from outside of their jurisdiction, they're going to know something's going on. But don't consider yourself to be in a silo. You have a whole lot of other towns in the state that are right there with you, and you need to start networking. That's the way to protect yourselves and your interests. Thanks for that.
Thank you, Joe. We really have two questions, and the first one is for Chief Humphreys. It's really about the impact on law enforcement. We saw where 1 million people in New York failed to comply with the law, 375,000 in Connecticut. There were a lot of press reports about police officers who refused to uphold that law because they felt it was unconstitutional. What do you think the impact would be on the law enforcement community here?
I don't think there's enough cops right now to keep up with what happens. And I'm going to put it back on Mark for a second, because if he sent Mark a ton of cases, and he knows how busy the law enforcement in Rutland County is, it would stretch. I have 4 full-time guys in Fairhaven. Down in Pawlet, there's Dave and I. There's no law enforcement here. We couldn't keep up with that. I can't tell you we would actively seek it out. We couldn't really turn a blind eye. If we had it in front of us, we might have to take action on it, because we do take an oath. We are sworn to do a job. Again, it's that there are laws that sometimes that they're not there in front of you. You do have some discretionary, but we couldn't keep up with that. The jails are, like, as far as Senator Flory, the jails are taxed. I used to be a correctional officer. They're putting people on the street because it's overloaded. And then that's furthermore taxing the correction system with house arrest. And again, they come out on the street because there's no housing, they commit crimes, they end up back in Mark's corner again. So it seems to be a never-ending circle with that. So as far as enforcing a law like that, it would be very difficult to do that. It would be almost impossible.
He's right. If he arrests them and he prosecutes them, we can't jail them. There just is not sufficient facility. On top of that, frankly, every time we pass a law that we are not going to be able to enforce, we cheapen all of the laws, and that's inexcusable.
Okay, I'm going to call the last question right here with this gentleman, and then we're going to allow the candidates in the audience just to introduce themselves, and then we're going to go to the social. So, sir, you have the last question.
This is just comment for Chief Humphreys. I'm out of the same area as he is up there. You said you are hired to enforce the law. You're also hired to enforce the Constitution, and that would be against the Constitution. So how could you arrest somebody who is using their constitutional rights, even though the law is wrong?
Again, that's that whole area of discretion and how I would have to do further research on how that would be played out. So it'd be hard for me to make that decision. I'm just like, right now, if my town passes an ordinance for X, Y, and Z, I took an oath that I have to enforce that, the state, federal, and local law enforcement ordinance and laws.
So that means you'd be up for treason against the Constitution then?
I would have to read it fully before I can answer that question.
And I am Vice President of Vermont also.
And you should point out that Bill also is the high bailiff right now, and he's the only person in the county that could arrest the sheriff. So they could get interested.
You got a lot.
So with that, we're gonna wrap up the panel portion, and I just want to say that Dolores, once again, you put together an excellent panel. I think everybody here in the room has learned a great deal, and we thank each of the panelists for agreeing to participate tonight, and we thank you for your time. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the candidates in the audience. I'm going to start with my immediate left in the front row, and we'll work our way back. And if people who wish to would please stand up and just say who they are, what they're running for, and give us a little idea of what your position is on gun issues and sportsmen's rights in the state. So, Brian?
My name is Brian Collmore. I live in Rutland Town. I have lived there for about 15 years. I was in West Rutland for 25 years prior. I'm running for the Senate in Rutland County. And to Evan's point, and this is the way I felt for quite a while, I think even the talk about changing legislation is a solution for a problem that quite frankly does not exist. to David's point, regardless of the wording of whatever would come about, I could not support, nor if I was elected, could I vote to change the laws at all. Pretty simple.
Good evening. First, I'd like to take this, well, my name is Valerie Harris, and I'm running to be your representative for this district. And first, I'd like to thank Dolores for putting on this event, and for Kevin Mullen and the panel for being here. And thank you very much to the Pawlet Fire Department for having us. Many of you don't know that before the past few years, last 2.5 years, I've been fighting for your gun rights. I have been going up to Montpelier and Burlington. I have testified in all 3 of the hearings that they had against for the gun ordinances. And I've also organized for gun owners of Vermont 2 rallies, both in 2013 and 2014, to protect your gun rights in this state. I'm a member of Gun Owners of Vermont. I'm a member of the NRA. I have an A rating, and I am endorsed. In fact, the only thing that's more important than your Second Amendment is your First Amendment, and they're trying to take that away from you now. So what I really want to ask you is to give me your support, because if you vote for me, I will continue to fight for those rights, and I will go up to Montpelier, and I will continue to fight as hard as I can to protect the preservation of your gun rights in this state. Thank you very much.
Well, let's start with Patty. Let's go in order.
Oh, sorry. Patty McCoy. Hi, Patty. I'm the Poultney Town Clerk and Treasurer, have been for 24 years, and I am running for the Poultney IRA State Representative spot. I'm going to keep it short. I absolutely agree with what Mr. Collmore said, and I see several Poultney people in the audience, Mr. Williams, Mr. Seco, the McMurrays, and I welcome your phone calls when I am up there. Thank you very much.
Mark?
How do you do? I'm Mark Muir, and I'm the current state's attorney, and I'm running for re-election this November as state's attorney. My office is a county office. My job is to charge cases of people who violate the law. This has been a great discussion. I appreciate Dolores having it, and thank Senator Mullen for giving me notice that this is going on. But I don't pass the laws, I enforce the laws. My job is and has been for 30 years, and will be in the next 4 years as well with your support, prosecuting persons who commit crime. If they commit crime with firearms, then we will prosecute them. There is no state law for possession of a firearm. So my office has not, and we don't intend to, not to prosecute Chief Humphreys for treason. If he applies the law, then we are not going to prosecute offenses that don't exist. But there are serious crimes. There's break-in crimes with guns. There's terrible child abuse, and there's drug offenses in this county, which we all know. I think Vermont does have a low crime rate in the nation, but it's too high for us. And I try to put people away that need to be put away by holding them without bail or on high bail where we have strong evidence and it's a violent crime, and by getting as hard a sentence as I can get based on the evidence for the cases that come before us. And that's what I'll continue to do with your support. And I'd like to, again, thank you. You have a beautiful town down here. I don't have that many cases out of Pawlet, and that should be a good thing, but I know that we always do better. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm Tony DuPont. I'm running in Bennington 4, which comprises towns of Manchester, Arlington, Sandgate, and Sunderland. And I'm 100% with the group here, that no changes in the law. And I'd like to thank Peg Flory for telling me about being hacked. So it wasn't you that sent me that email about getting rid of
my name is Robin Chestnut Tangerman, and I'm running for House of Representatives for this district, for the towns of Tinmouth, Middletown Springs, Wells, Pawlet, and Rupert. I'd like to thank the panel for this information tonight. It's been very informative. I'd like to thank you all for turning out. I seem to be, to a certain extent, the fly in the ointment tonight, in that I do favor universal background checks. I think that it's an important tool for law enforcement, for Mark to do his job, and for Chief Humphreys to do his job. As far as the statements that I've heard about where that automatically leads to, that is not my agenda at all. And I don't feel that there's an automatic progression. Background checks are a means of keeping weapons, firearms out of the hands of those who have committed serious crimes. And that is the full extent of my firearms stance. Thank you for the opportunity. Just wanted to say that I am a gun owner, so I am not anti-gun. I just support a balanced approach. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Eric Mack, and I'm running a write-in campaign for this legislative seat for the House of Representatives. And I will not support or vote for any gun control legislation, but I think there's a lot more that needs to be done with economic development, with social outreach for people with mental illness without getting into gun control issues. I think these are the underlying issues.
I'm Anthony Siena. I'm running for governor. I've been on the record saying I will veto any charter changes to the Second Amendment. I fully, any charter changes or Article 16 charter changes, I've met personally with Ed and his group. So I'm probably one of the few people in Chittenden County that will fully protect your Second Amendment in your Article 16 rights.
Feel free to mingle and talk with anybody that's in the panel or in the audience, and thank you for coming.